What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Next Pats podcast. I'm Phil Perry. It is a Caleb Williams week here on Next Pats and on NBC Sports Boston.com because we are going to have our next edition of our mock draft series coming at you online this week. And this week, what do the Patriots do? They're trading up to number 1 overall from number 3 to draft the presumed top choice in this year's draft, USC quarterback Caleb Williams. Now, why would I have the Patriots doing this? Well, let's peel back the curtain a little bit here and just let you know, as I have in my writing, as we've written these mock drafts, I want to attack these mocks from a variety of different angles so that we're covering our bases with a number of different scenarios between now and the start of the draft. If we were to just keep the Patriots at 3 overall and just assume that they're drafting a quarterback at 3 overall, we're just basically going to bounce back and forth between Jaden Daniels and Drake May for 3 months, and nobody wants that, quite frankly. And it's not all that interesting. So what we're doing this week is we are having them execute what I believe is an unbelievable, literally unbelievable trade, which would be pick number 3 overall, pick number 34 overall, and pick number 68 overall, the Patriots' first, second, and third round picks. You'd be sending those to Chicago for their number 1 overall choice for the right to draft Caleb Williams. In my opinion, they shouldn't do it. In my opinion, they won't do it. Still, I think it's fair to play this game and just see how much it would cost and whether or not that cost is worthwhile. Is the juice worth the squeeze? Is Caleb Williams that good? Is he that guy that the Patriots should essentially punt on the remaining valuable picks in this year's draft? That's a top of the second round pick, 34 overall. That's a top of the third round pick, and 68 overall. And according to the Jimmy Johnson trade chart, the chart which Bill Belichick just a couple of years ago told us is essentially still being used across the league to gauge whether or not trades are equal in value, or the returns on those deals for both teams are equal in value. And that's what it would cost. According to the Jimmy Johnson chart, pick number 34 overall is 560 points. That's how much it's worth. Pick number 68 overall, Patriots' third round pick, is worth 250 points overall. So that is 810 points if you smash those two things together. What's the difference between 1 overall and 3 overall, where the Bears and Patriots respectively are picking? 800 points. So by dealing away your second and third round picks, you're giving them a surplus of about 10 points, which is nothing. It's really nothing. It's the equivalent of a 6th round pick. So if you want to play with that and send a few late round picks back to the Patriots, and the Patriots send them something in the future that kind of gets that 10-point differential evened out, who cares? It doesn't matter. That's essentially what it would cost. You're 2 and 3 to move up from 3 to number 1 if you're the New England Patriots. Not worth it, in my opinion, especially in a draft where at the top of the second round, you could get a real difference maker either at receiver in a deep receiver draft class, which we'll continue to talk about over the course of the next few months, and a deep tackle class, a rare tackle class where you might be able to get a starting caliber player you feel good about eventually starting at least at 34 overall. And a tackle at that position where they are the freakiest of the freaks in some respects, they are the rarest of humans, that almost never happens. So you're going to deal with the opportunity to get a guy like that, whether it's Patrick Paul, who we've mocked to the Patriots in the past, out of Houston, tackle who's got all kinds of length and all kinds of athleticism. He's a little raw though, so he might last until the 30s. You're going to punt on the opportunity to get a guy like that along with a quarterback at 3 overall just to get an upgrade, ostensibly, theoretically, an upgrade at quarterback at 1 overall? No, thank you. I wouldn't do it. However, we have a handful of interviews that I want to play for you in this Caleb Williams edition of the Next Pats podcast. And maybe people will change your minds. We have a variety of different perspectives here. We have his head coach, Lincoln Riley. We have Connor Rogers, who is NBC Sports draft analyst extraordinaire. He is phenomenal. He's all over all of these players, all of these prospects, but Caleb Williams, obviously, specifically because he is considered one of the best quarterback prospects that we have seen in some time in the draft. And then we're also talking to Ashley Adamson, who's had a chance to cover him up close as a member of the Pac-12 network. We talked to her last year on Radio Row. We talked to her again this year. She is tremendous. She has great insight on all of these Pac-12 guys. We're going to be talking about a bunch of them over the course of the next few weeks. So we have someone who reported on him. We have his head coach, and we have a national perspective who's a little bit removed, but has the ability to, in dissecting the tape and understanding where he fits with this class overall, give us a great perspective as to what Caleb Williams might be next year. So let's start with Lincoln Riley, head coach at USC. We understand the story. He would look at USC as sort of a rebuilding situation, right? He gets there. He brings Caleb Williams from Oklahoma with him to USC. They go through this process together. And that is something that Lincoln Riley would tell you, because he told us, should mean a lot when it comes to breaking down Caleb Williams's character. Could he have gone to another college program that was ready to compete in the here and now as soon as he got there 2 years ago? Of course he could have. Highly coveted across the country. But he chose to stick with his guy, stick with Lincoln Riley, go to USC. Obviously, not a bad opportunity there. NIL dollars flowing to an incredible degree for somebody like Caleb Williams there. But not the easiest situation. We saw that this past year. He wasn't surrounded by an all-star cast, and it made life hard on him at times. So let's play for you that first answer from Lincoln Riley. So he had the opportunity to speak with us via Zoom to our Seth Rubin-Wright, who is the senior manager of audio and digital strategy for NBC Sports. He also happens to be a USC guy, so he enjoyed this conversation. But you're going to hear his answer to Seth's first question about Caleb Williams. Why did that decision to transfer to USC so impress Lincoln Riley?
He's done a great job, coming in here these first 2 years and helping us get this program restarted. Everybody sees the physical talent, but I think him being one of those guys that was willing to come here and take on that challenge, he could have went to more certainly ready-made situations when he made the decision to transfer. And for him to come into this and knowing that we had a lot of building to do and to dive right in says a lot about him. And he's still a young quarterback. I mean, he's still got a lot of growth and a lot of development that's going to continue to happen. So as his journey continues, it's going to be great to watch, and certainly excited for him and certainly hoping he lands in a tremendous situation.
Riley there mentions that he is a young quarterback, which is interesting, right? He's 22 years old. So it's not as though, he's still a fresh-faced teen coming into the league. He missed his senior year of high school in D.C., went to Gonzaga Prep. Very reputable athletic reputation there. Great school as well. Haven't been in the D.C. area for 4 years myself, and helping cover the high school scene there for a time. But he missed his senior year because of COVID, as a lot of these guys have. Then he gets to Oklahoma. He doesn't play right away. So he's really been a wire-to-wire starter for just his 2 years at USC, adapting to a new team, new teammates, etc. So what you're going to hear in this next answer from Lincoln Riley is he's going to highlight that, and he's going to highlight his relative level of inexperience and why that should allow him to continue to improve as he grows into his own game at the next level. Obviously, the NFL is a tough place to do that sort of development. We understand that. But to be in different game situations, you're going to hear Lincoln Riley talk about how he could even improve in the locker room, which is an answer that I found to be very interesting. Those are the kinds of things that are going to have to come along. So without further ado, here is Lincoln Riley talking about how Caleb Williams can improve as a pro.
Well, I think it's just accumulating reps and being in these different situations that you get into as a quarterback. I missed his senior year of high school because of COVID. He didn't really play for us at OU his freshman year until midway through the season, and so he's still a young guy. He's grown and he's improved a lot, but there's still a lot more left for him to improve on. And it's in all areas. And to me, the biggest thing for him is he just needs reps. He just got to continue to be in these different game situations, continue to be in different situations in the locker room where he's got to get out of his comfort zone and continue to grow. But the potential is certainly there. And obviously he's had some really great results early on in his career, and then has a chance to get a lot better as well.
That answer about the locker room is a fascinating one to me, because it is in no way a slight at Caleb Williams, but it's stating a fact. Could he be better in certain locker room situations? He probably could. Again, because he's a relatively young player and he's still figuring that part of that job out. I think from a Patriots perspective, and if you're a Patriots fan who's listening to this, do you want to move heaven and earth to get up to number 1 overall to draft a player who's still figuring things out in that regard? Never mind the on the field stuff, which is, of course, the case. He had 33 fumbles over the course of the last 3 years. He had 16 last year alone. There are still certain things he does on the field where, despite his tremendous physical, athletic, arm-specific gifts, he makes plays that will make coaches at the next level shake their heads, whether it's Alex Van Pelt, Patriots' new offensive coordinator, or anybody else. But the part about the readiness to lead and the readiness to be the best example for your teammates as to what your team should be, I think that's a real question, especially for a team in New England that I believe wants more maturity across the board. Having spoken to a number of people in a number of different corners of that building over the course of the last 2 seasons, whether it's on the coaching staff, in the front office, or in the locker room, I think there are a number of folks who are still with the organization who believe maturity was an issue across the board, again, in a variety of different corners of the building at One Patriot Place. And if you sell your whole draft to bring in a player who might be great and might eventually mature into something amazing, is that a process that you want to go through? Is that a process that you really want to help a player through? He is so special in terms of his talent. The answer might be yes. My guess at this point, right now, especially given the other 2 great quarterbacking talents that we believe are in this draft class in Drake May and Jaden Daniels, the answer for the Patriots will be no. Let's get to our final answer, though, with Lincoln Riley, because, again, I believe it applies to what's going on in New England. And this actually was a question that I gave to Seth before he was able to do his interview with Lincoln Riley, saying, ask him if he thinks the Patriots should move heaven and earth to get to 1 overall and draft his guy. Here was his answer.
It'll be really interesting. I gave up trying to predict all that a long time ago, because it's obviously so many different things can happen. And I know there's a lot of, great players and other great quarterbacks certainly that are, that are in this year's draft class. So obviously we think a lot of our guy, and we think he's certainly second to none. But I think more than anything, just hoping that he ends up in a great situation, with a great set of coaches and a really good supporting cast, because no matter how good you are in that league, and we've seen it time and time over again, you got to have the right people around you. It is still a team game, and the success of the organization, the success of the individual player, it takes everyone. And so hoping he ends up in a great situation, and that's if that happens, then wherever that's at, we'll be good with it.
It is still a team game, and you do need to be in a great situation at that position, no matter how talented you are. Is this the right place for Caleb Williams in that regard? I think it can be eventually if the Patriots handle their rebuild right. I'm with Lincoln Riley on this front. It doesn't matter who you are at quarterback. Let's take this quarterbacking class specifically in the draft. If Drake May comes in, if Jaden Daniels comes in, Jaden Daniels has played a ton of football. He's sort of on the opposite end of the spectrum from Caleb Williams in that regard. Heisman Trophy winner, like Caleb Williams, but 5 years, big-time college football, first in the Pac-12, then in the SEC. He's probably seen a lot more in terms of types of games, types of defenses, live situations, locker room situations, practice situations. He's been through more in all likelihood. Does that mean he's going to be able to succeed with nothing around him where Caleb Williams wouldn't? No. They both are going to need a ton of help at the next level, as all young quarterbacks do. And so Lincoln Riley is not wrong in that regard, but it also might be an argument against doing what we're talking about here, giving away a valuable 2nd-round pick, a valuable 3rd-round pick, just to get up to 1 overall to draft Caleb Williams, because you are necessarily hurting your opportunity to improve your roster, to improve your situation. There's that word again that Lincoln Riley used. You're hurting your chances to build that thing up by trading those picks away to get Caleb Williams, who, again, like everybody else, is going to need help. All right, let's get to our conversation with Ashley Adamson about Caleb Williams. We talked to her about a number of different prospects, but we started with Williams for obvious reasons and wanted to get to the bottom of what he would be like makeup-wise, character-wise, when he ends up with his next team. And if that were New England, I think her answers would all apply. Here's our conversation with the great Ashley Adamson from the Pac-12 Network. Have a listen. Very excited now to have with us on the Next Pats podcast, Ashley Adamson of the Pac-12 Network, also of the Your Mom podcast, which I believe you've got some Boston background. I believe if you search for the Your Mom podcast in Boston, it just auto-corrects to Your Mom.
We should do a franchise. You want to do like a spinoff? You could kind of host your Mom podcast in Boston. I think that would be perfect.
Like a regional. We could do that.
Yeah, I don't know anything about how media works, but I think you would be great.
We could do that. So you host that podcast with Lisa McCaffrey, yeah. Christian McCaffrey's mom. Maybe we could just do a local one, and maybe we find, like, for instance, Devin and Jason McCourty's mom. And, she's a well-known sports mom locally. She wouldn't have the Boston accent, so you wouldn't get the full feel of it, but we could workshop this.
You know what I would do? I would just go to Southie with a mic, and I would just interview every mom that I saw walk around. And then you'd get, like, the flavor that you needed for that. Like, that part of the podcast, I think we could figure out how to do. But I will tell you what, the best part about this show is that you can interview any mom. We are the ultimate oversharers, so like you're gonna get good stuff no matter who you bring on. They're gonna be the ones that bring the story. So that's kind of how it all started.
That is a great point. If you find a mom, she is going to want to talk about her kid.
She's gonna tell you something that's gonna embarrass her kid. Like that's what we do. Like that's what we're here for.
No doubt about it. So yes, the Your Mom podcast, Your Mother. How's your mother? And we could just talk about, maybe we just even talk about the moms. I don't know.
Sign you to a deal as soon as this interview's over.
All right. We have to talk about, speaking of regionally, in New England, we're talking a lot about quarterbacks. And you've watched some great quarterbacks this year covering the Pac-12, as you do, Ashley. Let's ask you first about the guy who's expected to go number one overall, Caleb Williams. A lot of questions, not necessarily about his game. There may be a few. I think there are questions about his makeup, Ashley, and you've seen a lot of great college players make the transition from college to pro, and I'm curious, having watched him as long as you have, what you think about his ability to transition to the next level and how his makeup will translate.
So what's interesting about that question, because I think you nailed it spot on. I think you watch him play, and he's a generational type quarterback. He's a magician. He can get out of situations that you think there's no way this isn't going to result in a 10-yard loss, sack. No, and all of a sudden it's like a 30 yard play downfield. So he has all the tools. He can make all the throws. He can hurt you with his legs. He's so hard to tackle. He's cerebral, but off the field he's a little bit aloof is probably the word that I would use. I remember the first few times I interviewed him, I'm like, I don't think I'm not getting anywhere. But he's really thoughtful, and he's not a man of many words. And everything he does, I think the way that he has been raised and his dad's involvement in thinking about things of you're a brand, you're a business, and let's think about how we are going to put all of these things together. So I think sometimes that comes off as a little bit, he's not the most effusive, but he doesn't care what other people think about him. And that's one of the best qualities that you can have when you're talking about playing that position. The criticism, the outside noise, it doesn't really matter because he's really confident in who he is and he knows what he wants. So it will be interesting to see. There are guys like, I would say Bo Nix is kind of on the other end of that spectrum of the ultimate team guy. Everybody rallies around him. Caleb, people love playing with him because he's unbelievable, but it's a different flavor. So he's going to be terrific wherever he goes. I think most people assume he will go number one overall. But there are he's a different cat is probably the easiest way to say it.
It's interesting you mentioned the ability to block out the noise. If you could do that in a market like Boston, not that we're expecting him to end up with the Patriots, that can only help because it can skew a little negative at times.
No.
Hand up, we've all partaken in that kind of coverage. But what do you think, or how do his coaches react to him? I'm curious about that because one thing Matt Ryan told us Well, we were here yesterday on Radio Row was the best references for him when he was coming out of school, coming out of BC. You're a BC person as well. We mentioned your Boston ties. He said the best references in terms of his character probably would have been the coaches that he was around for the most amount of time. So Tom O'Brien, or the strength coach, or the quarterback's coach, or the offensive line coach, because those guys had years of time built up with Matt Ryan. And so, he couldn't fake it in an interview with a team at the Combine or at the Senior Bowl or what have you. It was that sort of background. What do you think his coaches will tell NFL teams about him when it comes to Caleb?
Lincoln Riley and I have had a few conversations about Caleb, and I remember it was after they lost to Utah and kind of all of their hopes for the season had sort of been dashed at that point. I mean, they still knew they were in the running for the Pac-12 championship. But Lincoln said, I remember after that game, I went and we talked in the locker room, the two of us, for an hour. And he said the conversation was, and we were both kind of lifting each other up. It was, we haven't come this far to come this far. Like, real leadership is when you can take a situation that feels like all is lost, that everybody's stressed out, everybody's down, and can you come through and get everybody together and lead them through that? It's easy to lead when things are going well, right? And you're winning and the W's are racking up, but when things get hard, that's when those characteristics come through. And so now, granted, you look at the way they closed out the season, I think they lost 4 of their last 5 games. It didn't end well. And yet, you never saw Caleb throw in the towel. You never saw him not compete. I never questioned whether or not he was out there and giving it everything that he had. So I think his coaches, they love him. And I think he's one of those guys that has a special, unique talent. And there's a lot of different ways to do this, right? There's so many different personalities and different skill sets in this league that it's not like you have to fit this one mold to be successful.
Great stuff there from Ashley. Again, she had a chance to watch him up close, get a great view on how it all went at USC over the course of the last couple of years, from Heisman Trophy to crying with his mom in the stands. Now let's get further removed and let's get that national perspective from Connor Rogers. Does a phenomenal job for NBC Sports in terms of not only being one of our voices when it comes to fantasy football in season, covers the Jets incredibly well. We've had him on the Next Pats podcast before to talk specifically about the Patriots rivals, but he's all over the draft. He was fresh off a trip to the Senior Bowl, so he had a chance to see some of the, I would say, tier 2 quarterbacks down in Mobile, Alabama, but he's also really plugged in when it comes to coaching staffs across the league, scouting departments across the league. And so his view of Caleb Williams, his skill set, how that might play at the next level, really, really valuable to us. Appreciate his time on Radio Row last week in Vegas. Here's our conversation with Connor Rogers. All right, very excited now to have with us on Next Pats, Connor Rogers, Fantasy Football Happy Hour, draft analyst for NBC Sports. Connor, thanks for being with us, man.
Dude, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
You are officially a multi-time friend of the podcast.
Which feels good, I got to say. There's a comfort level.
It is a big deal.
First one in person, though.
First one in person, so I feel like our relationship has already reached another level.
100%.
Hopefully you feel the same way.
I do.
Let's talk some draft.
Yes.
We both love talking about the draft. Let's talk about the presumed number 1 overall pick in this year's draft. Because the Patriots, while they don't have the first overall selection, they are kind of within striking distance of that first pick. And I'm wondering if you feel like, with all that you've looked into this and all that you understand about this year's quarterback class, is it worth it to move heaven and earth to get from 3 to 1 to take Caleb Williams?
I honestly, in a situation now, the prices could be crazy, right? Because this is Caleb Williams. He's highly regarded. Same with Drake May, who's viewed as the number 2 quarterback, right? That 1 and 2 spot. I think there's a world where it is. Now, the question I get here from Vegas, from the Senior Bowl, where every team was trying to figure out, is anybody going to actually pick up the phone in those 1 and 2 spots? Would the Bears actually move out? And because they need a quarterback, right? They like Justin Fields, but it feels like they're resigned to getting their guy. When you look at Washington, we know they want a quarterback. As much as Sam Howell had some moments this year, it feels like those teams are pretty set in those spots. So what would the cost be? Is that a situation for the Bears where they go, hey, we like Jaden Daniels. We would take him at 3. Can we get 2 more first-round picks? And is that something New England, which they have a lot of work to do on this roster, and they are well-equipped to fix that going into this new era, is that something that they're willing to do? So it would surprise me a lot, as tantalizing of a talent Caleb Williams is, Drake May is. When you're picking at 3, let's not forget, you could either get the best player in the draft in Marvin Harrison Jr., or you can get a promising quarterback as well in Jaden Daniels.
So many holes on the Patriots roster to give up real assets in order to get that guy, even though he may be great. I'm not sure that's the right fit. Why will he be great, in your opinion? We spend a lot of time talking about Drake May and Jaden Daniels. And Caleb Williams, it feels like especially lately, publicly at least, on Twitter, social media, etc., it feels like he has started to take some slings and arrows. But why do you think he has the potential to be a great quarterback as a pro?
Well, the reason for that is he comes into this year and he's already getting comparisons to Patrick Mahomes, which is a dangerous game. He's already locked into being the number one pick before ever having to play another game this season. And when you write down the scouting note, we do summer scouting, and when you write down the notes, the arm talent's phenomenal. The movement ability, the twitch in the pocket, the ability to reset the pocket, throw on the move, really hit any area of the field. It's very, very unique talent in that way. But playing within rhythm, playing with timing was something that you go, I'd like to see it get better. And the reality is it didn't get better this year. It didn't. Now, there was a lot of issues with USC, with the offense, with some of the play calling, where you're not just putting it all on Caleb Williams. So he's not a perfect prospect, but everything you'd want in a quarterback in terms of the ability to move, the ability to reset, and the accuracy. He's an accurate quarterback. I think he doesn't get enough credit for that because we're so obsessed with the splash plays. He's very, very accurate and confident at any area of the field, any down of the field, and his tape in 2022 against pressure was as good as I've seen from a prospect. That wasn't the case in 2023. So we have the sample size of greatness. Now can you consistently unlock that when things get harder?
It's really interesting. You've seen him do it.
Yes.
Can he recapture that? Can he do it consistently? And that is something that all quarterbacks are going to have to deal with. While you would love to see the consistency of a player from the pocket, clean pocket, replicable sorts of scenarios, that's just not the reality in the NFL. It's especially not the reality for the New England Patriots, who have all kinds of holes, again, on the offensive line. Is there something that scares you most about Caleb Williams? And let's talk specifically about his game, the on-the-field stuff.
I think when you look at it, it's I don't want to say obsession, but the habits, right? When things aren't in structure in offense, right? You start to form habits, and that is becoming a little obsessed with the out-of-structure play. And the defense can be prepared for that. They know, hey, if we keep you within structure, you're going to have to sit in the pocket where you don't look as comfortable compared to when you're out of the pocket. It's not that he's bad in the pocket. It's just that that's not his comfort zone. I don't want him escaping clean pockets and always looking to cut the field in half all the time. He doesn't need to do that. So I think that was something this year where if you play within rhythm, that's going to open up and set up the defense to fall apart when you do take your chances out of structure. So you really need to almost crawl before you sprint. Caleb at times, because he's so special, can go right into sprinting mode.
And I think at times that has led to ball security issues.
The fumbles are a real problem.
16 fumbles,
it's
I
a real
believe it
problem.
was last year.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if that's the kind of thing you can shake. Do you feel like that can be coached out of him at the next level?
I think the best comparison when you look at ball security getting so much drastically better in recent years is when Brian Dable was working with Josh Allen. Josh Allen was a turnover machine. He even has habits in stable left of still being that, because you're trying to keep him calm and finding those easy plays for him that when you are hitting the big plays, they aren't as often and they aren't as reckless. And I think so that gives you hope, right? Allen coming out of Wyoming as a prospect, and Caleb is very different. He's a lot smaller. He's a different of a prospect. But that's a situation where, yeah, you can coach it out of them. It could be the structure of the offense. It could be getting in the guy's head and going, this isn't the, this is the down and distance. This isn't the time where we take the gamble. This is the down and distance, maybe with the game on the line in the second half. This is the time to gamble. It's situational football. That's where coaching matters so much for the player and how that player takes to that coaching. So that'll be something really interesting to watch with him in terms of where he goes.
Does any of the off-the-field stuff concern you? The not meeting with the media after his last game at USC, we all know about the moment, he goes and sees his mom and he's crying in the stands. Does any of that, in terms of makeup, give you pause, or should it give NFL teams pause?
I think it's something they are absolutely going to look into. NFL teams cannot wait for the NFL Combine to sit down with Caleb Williams and see what are we getting. And there's been a lot of positive feedback from actually the coaches and the staff at USC. Lincoln Riley has gone on the record a lot to support him. So I think it's become overblown because the spotlight is on you. You're 20, 21 years old, where it's not fair to say this is who he is, right? Guys grow up. I mean, that's the nature of the business, and not all of them do. And that's what we need to figure out when adversity strikes. And adversity struck this year to USC.
Oh, yeah.
And it did not go well. That's the concern that teams have right now, because look at the other side of it, right? And I'm not saying Caleb Williams isn't a better prospect than these guys. He is, but Michael Penix is in this draft. He's had a million injuries. Adversity has struck. How did he respond? He led Washington to a national championship and was phenomenal for 2 seasons and really bounced back from that. Spencer Rattler had a long road. He's improved his stock. When you look at Jaden Daniels, he had to transfer from Arizona State to LSU and won the Heisman. There's a lot of quarterbacks that aren't as talented as Caleb Williams in this draft, but they've answered one of the biggest questions that scouts have. How will you respond when things are at their worst? Those guys checked a lot of those boxes. We don't know that with Caleb. We think with his mental makeup he can, but it's an uncertainty right now.
Great stuff there from Connor, from Ashley, from Lincoln Riley. Really appreciate all of them spending some time with us to tell us a little bit more about this guy that's about to go number 1 overall in the draft, or so we think, as we sit here on February 14th. Happy Valentine's Day out there, everyone. Hope you love the podcast. Hope you're sharing this podcast with those that you love. I want to express my love right now for our producer, John Henry, who's just tremendous in all facets, just absolutely killed it out there on Radio Row with us. The Skull Crusher did, made sure everything went so smoothly, because that is not my skill set. That is not how my brain works, but it is how his brain works, and we appreciate him for that. We appreciate you for listening. Keep an eye out for that latest mock draft that's going to have Caleb Williams going to the Patriots at 1 overall. Don't lose your minds when you see it. I don't think it's a great idea, but I do think it's an interesting conversation. Hopefully you felt as though that conversation was interesting right here on today's pod. We'll have another pod for you very, very soon. We are loaded up on content from Radio Row. Tremendous, tremendous stuff. All sorts of amazing guests. So keep an ear out for the next Pats episode. We'll talk to you next time.